One area that's often overlooked for storage is the place beneath the basement stairs. Now, not every house has a basement, but those that do have a terrific opportunity for additional storage space.
Cut out any drywall flush with the bottom of the stair stringers. Cut through the nails with the reciprocating saw and remove the 2x4 framing members as well. Use a level to draw a plumb line at the edge of the framing. Set the lip of the speed square in the opening with the apex on your plumb line. Read the degrees on the square where the vertical line intersects it. The angle is 49 degrees off the vertical plane. Use this reference angle to cut the bevel on the framing blocks. They will provide backing in the recessed area. Check the fit to make sure it's accurate. Cut the blocks to length to fill in the gaps between the studs. It will provide backing for the drywall. Nail the pieces in flush with the bottom of the stairs. Always use caution when working with air nailers. Screw the loose drywall edge to the backer, placing the screws about 10 inches apart. Install a 2x4 at the top of the opening for the cabinet to attach to. Use a scrap piece of 2x4 as a spacer to hold it down an inch and a half. Do the same thing at both sides, using your block to set your inch and a half reveal. Nail every 16 inches. Use a snap line to mark the plywood the width of the recess. Cut enough stock to wrap the opening at the top and both sides. Use iron-on edge banding to finish one edge of the birch plywood. It looks as good as solid lumber for far less money. Trim off the excess band material. Mark the vertical piece for length and make the bevel cut. Slide the piece in place and lift it up tight to the framing. Make the edge flush with the drywall and nail it with 2-inch nails. Cut and install the top piece the same way, carefully fitting the joint at the top. The 8-foot piece of plywood stopped just short of the opening, so I beveled the joint at this end. Secure the joint with glue and shim the piece plumb before you nail it to the framing with 2.5-inch nails. The floor in our opening wasn't even close to level, off a 1/2 inch in 4 feet. Rather than build the cabinet out of square, I opted to cut the bottom of the cabinet to fit the floor. This area is less visible and allows the inside of the box to remain square. Use solid lumber here for strength. With the pieces of the cabinet frame fit in the opening, lay out the locations of the vertical members. Divide the opening in thirds and plumb up with a level. Then mark the top locations. Cut the vertical members to length and dry fit them. These are solid maple 1x3s purchased from a local home store. Clamp the 1x3s to the edge of the face frame to avoid measuring errors as you mark out the locations for the horizontal pieces. Clearly mark each vertical member to keep things lined up.
I took the face frame out of the opening and laid it here on my work table. Let me show you how I laid out the drawers now. The layout of the drawers was based on the size of this very first triangle. I came in and took this measurement down at this narrow edge and decided to make these 3 drawers all the same size. So I dropped that mark down here, and that set this mark location. Now as I put my pieces in, I started over here with this one, brought that line across, and then to get this space, I just split it in half, putting one here and one here. Now I had this one already located, again, to make this triangle the same as these others. And then this space, we divided unevenly. This will be a drawer, and this will be a pull-out tabletop for the kids to play at.
I chose biscuit joints for the face frame. They're strong and efficient. I flipped all the pieces over to cut the joints on the flat table surface. That will keep the faces perfectly aligned when we assemble it. Make a series of self-gripping clamping blocks from cut-off ends of scrap. This will allow your clamps to grip the angled piece. Nail in 3 or 4 brads and then cut them off, leaving about an 1/8 inch extending. The nails will grip the wood surface rather than slide on it. Tap the piece into the face frame where you want to place a clamp, making sure the nails bite into the wood. The block allows parallel clamping pressure for a tight joint.
Okay, now when you glue up a big assembly like this one, you have to make sure you dry fit everything first. Now with this one, if you don't have this many clamps, you could do a pre-assembly, say this area in here. But we have enough clamps to do the whole thing. Now if you're going to use black pipe clamps like these, make sure you raise them up off the surface of your wood. If any glue makes contact with both the clamp and the wooden surface, it'll stain the wood.
Biscuits need plenty of glue to perform well, and this yellow glue begins to set in about 15 minutes. Start at one side, then work your way across the frame. Place clamps directly over the cross members for best results.
Well, now that our face frame is glued up, the next thing to do is to build the cabinet box itself. Now we need a flush surface for the hardware to mount to for our drawers. We're going to be using 1/2" MDF for that. Now we're going to space it to make it a full 2 1/4 inches wide to match the face frame stock. We're going to do that using 3/4 inch and 1/2 inch plywood spacers. Now longer screws to the hardware will come all the way through and hit the plywood, giving it a nice, firm, solid anchor.
Install each layer of plywood in succession. The order doesn't matter, but the glue does. Make sure each layer gets covered. Install the outer layer of MDF. Glue it and staple with 1 3/4 inch staples every 6 inches. Build the other panels the same way. Cut each panel to length. Make them 1 1/2 inches shorter than the face frame to allow room for the top and provide an installation lip. Make the back by tracing the face frame on a piece of 1/4 inch plywood. Cut it to fit using the inner marks to locate the inside panels. Attach the back to the panels. Temporary braces hold things together during assembly. Staple every 6 inches here as well. Lay the assembly on its back to install the face frame. Use enough glue on each panel edge to assure a solid bond. Set the face frame on the cabinet and align the frame with the panels. Nail it together, centering the nails so they drive into the plywood. Install the short end panel last. Use clamps to help position the pieces before nailing. Set the inside edge of the panel flush with the inner edge of the face frame. Next, install the full extension slides. I clamped these in pairs and used a piece of 1/4 inch plywood to provide clearance to the bottom of each drawer opening. To save time, attach the front of each piece to the MDF with 1 screw. Then, set the back ends with a framing square set to the inside of the face frame. The hardware has holes that allow adjustment both up and down and front to back. When the hardware is completely installed, cut the top piece to size and put it on. Use this piece to square the whole case. Set the front of the top in place and nail only the edge at both top and bottom. Then square the case to the top, pushing it into position as you nail it. A helper is useful, but not absolutely necessary. Immediately, the whole unit is stronger. Finish the case by nailing the top securely to each panel. Now, the moment of truth. Slide the unit into the opening, checking your clearances as you go. When the unit is in its final position, check it for plumb. Because our floor was so far out, we needed to shim the case in several places across the front to move the top of the unit toward the back wall. Place shims wherever necessary to level your cabinet and assure proper hardware operation.
Now there, doesn't that look great? The next step, of course, is to measure for the drawers. And it's a gorgeous day outside. I think we'll build those out in the garage.